In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Attraction begins the moment you stop seeking approval and start embodying truth. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're diving into three powerful themes: breaking the nice guy pattern, reclaiming embodied masculinity, and why truth is the ultimate aphrodisiac. Our guest today is Edoardo Guidali, a dating coach for men who are ready to lead with power, presence, and authenticity. In a world filled with surface-level advice and manipulative tactics, Edoardo offers something deeper, a roadmap back to truthful attractions and grounded masculine energy. This episode isn't about getting the girl, it's about becoming the man who no longer has to chase. We explored Edoardo's own journey from emotional disconnections to radical embodiments and how he helps men drop performance, regulate their nervous systems, and lead interactions with clarity and depth. If you ever feel stuck in the loop of overthinking, oversharing, and perhaps overgiving, this conversation is your wake-up call. If this episode resonated with you, please leave a review or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps more people discover meaningful conversation just like this. Let's begin. Mr. Edoardo Guidali, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Sam. It's a pleasure.
We're glad to have you here, and very exciting to dive into some quite profound conversation with you. But to kick us off, tell us more about the work of a relationship coach.
Well, I think relationship coaching is very, very interesting, and I focus especially on families and couples. It's quite fascinating for me because there is so much to talk about when it comes to relationships, and there is so much that can be done. So I'm very passionate about communication, relationship coaching. My focus is especially on communication because I think that too many couples and in too many families, we don't talk enough, and we don't talk enough in a healthy way. And so, after doing that, for my family and in my relationships, I'm so glad that now I can do it for so many other people.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And it's quite interesting. The beginning of your journey was very interesting for me to dive deeper in. So it seemed like you left in actually a very stable corporate career to pursue basically what is your passion in within this industry. And I really want to have you sort of classify more around the fact that what was sort of the defining moment that made you realize that perhaps corporate life wasn't for you, and made you basically pursue that passion so actively?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very interesting question. It all started when I got an autoimmune disease called multiple chemical sensitivity. And it was quite a struggle for me because it is a recently discovered and recently recognized autoimmune disease. It's an environmental disease. And so I was struggling a lot because 90% of the doctors I talk about it with, they didn't know what it was. They didn't know what to do. And I had the impression that there were very little chance of recovery, a little bit like, long COVID. The scientific community doesn't have a good understanding on it, and it's really quite difficult to overcome. And so I was in this period in which I was trying to get my health back. And, like many people who, for example, get burnt out at work, they hit a wall and then they start reflecting, upon their life, what they are doing, if they want to make a change in direction. And so I was in that same place. I knew that I wanted to make a change. I knew that I didn't want to be sick in my life. I wanted to have a healthy, fulfilling, and meaningful life. And I grabbed an opportunity. When I was staying at my parents' place in Italy, because my grandfather was very sick. He was in a hospital, and we knew that he didn't have a long time. Things started escalating with my family. We always had lots of problems, but in that period specifically, and we didn't get along with each other, so we wouldn't have many conversations. Now I'm at the time I lived in Switzerland and I was just visiting my parents. And when I was living and studying in Switzerland, we wouldn't really see each other very often. We wouldn't really have lots of phone calls. So we were very distant from each other, very apart. And it was in this period in which I was thinking about making a change in my life that I saw all of these problems in my family. And I got the crazy idea to sit at a table, all of us, and to try to talk about our problems, which is something that we never did. So everybody reluctantly agrees. I still remember that there was a lot of skepticism. My sister told me it's going to be a complete catastrophe. My mother said to me, it's not going to make a change. I mean, it's nice that you want to try, but I'm sure that there is not going to be any sort of impact. And so I found myself being the moderator of this meeting, or what I call it, a family reunion. I found myself to be the moderator, and I started bringing up little problems. You don't want to start with big problems. So I was like, let's start with little problems. And I started giving some rules to the discussion so that people wouldn't interrupt each other's. And I started putting myself in other people's shoes. And I was like, okay, it's very interesting because it's the first time that we really sit to talk about problems, and we are learning so much about each other's. And so we started having these family reunions once a week, usually on weekends, 2 to 3 hours at a time. And we were all very impressed by how much we were learning about each other's and solving what were most of the times misunderstandings or little problems that accumulated over the years. And after 1 month, we did it for several months, but after 1 month, the situation, the dynamics in our family completely changed. We started being comfortable with each other. We refound our happiness in the family, and we couldn't believe how much things improved in so little. Because if you go, for example, to a psychologist normally to talk about your family, you expect to be there at least for a year and to make little improvements, or at least this was the experience of the people that I know.
Sure.
And there we were in 1 month, and we made so much improvement. We were so much happier together. And in 6 months' time, we had our first vacation together in Paris after 10 years of not going on vacation as a family. So it was really amazing. And, during this process, I kept being the moderator of these family reunions, and everyone noticed that I was quite good at it. But I personally noticed that I really, really enjoyed it, that it really energized me, and that I really loved to, putting everybody at the table and understanding different perspectives, and to try to see other people see these different perspectives, and working out issues, misunderstandings, and all of these problems together. So I slowly started thinking it would be so good to do this, for other families, for other people in relationships, because the reality is that in most cases, families don't really talk, couples don't really talk, or at least they might talk sometimes, but they learn how to avoid problems. There is always a topic in a family or in a couple that causes problems. And what I see 90% of the time is that families and couples learn how to avoid these topics to maintain harmony and balance in the relationship, in the family. But actually, they suffer a lot because they cannot really talk about what makes them unhappy, and they cannot grow, they cannot develop as a couple, as a family. And that's why I decided to become a communication coach specialized in families and couples, because I think that there are so many beautiful families, so many beautiful couples that struggle or fall apart just because they cannot communicate in a healthy way. So this has been since the beginning my inspiration, and it has kept me motivated until now, and it is nowadays my strongest motivation to help other people to finally communicate, finally understand themselves, and move on to the next stage of their relationship, their family.
Lovely. Yeah, we know that many relationships obviously breaks down due to very simple communication mistakes. And obviously you've been able to identify the most common pitfalls and how to avoid them. I got this great quote from you actually, which was most conflict ain't about what's being said, it's about what's basically left unsaid, which is quite interesting. I'd love for you to dive deeper into this quotes, and perhaps tell me more, why do people struggle so much to express their true feeling in a relationship?
Absolutely. Many times it's, as you said, what has been left unsaid that causes problems. And your question is a very good one. Why don't we talk about what's important? And in so many cases, the vast majority of cases, at the core, there is a very strong fear. So we are scared to talk about a certain topic that is difficult for us. But which kind of a fear is this? Usually it's fear of abandonment. So if we talk about, a couple, a relationship, um, many times we are afraid, even if unconsciously, to be abandoned if we show a specific side of ourselves. Maybe it's about, usually it's for men, if we show weaknesses, we are afraid that we are going to lose our, strong role, and we are going to see, we are going to be seen as weak, and we are going to be left. This has to do maybe also with, societal expectations, men, especially in corporations, but also sometimes in family, are supposed to be, strong, and they're supposed to leave their emotions at home. So there is also a lot of societal pressure that makes us keep things, hidden. But at the core, there is this fear of abandonment, that if we show our emotions, like in this case, if we show our feelings, if we show vulnerability, we are in a bad situation, and we might be abandoned by others. And, this is something that you see, especially in couples, during the first stage of the relationship, both people are really watching what they are saying, because they don't want to say something wrong that makes the other person, get up and get out from the restaurant,
Right.
But, this is like an attitude that, it might be good, it might be funny in the beginning of the relationship, but, at some stage of the relationship, you want to really try to be honest, and you really want to be your authentic self, because if you keep pretending to be someone else, you are building a relationship that is not based on authenticity and truthfulness. So if we instead shift to feminism, the fear is the same. It's the fear of abandonment. But it works in a slightly different way. So when we talk about families, from the perspective of the children, children look up at their parents, and especially when they're very little, when they're babies, they are very dependent on them. Babies in the nature wouldn't survive, and so they need, their parents, they need their guidance. And that's good. But the problems start arising when parents, for example, put a condition on the love that is given to the child. So when there is not unconditional love, problems can arise. I always make the example of, a family of doctors. Just imagine that, the parents are doctors, and the parents of these parents are doctors, and so on. Sometimes that's the case. So when they have children, many times they expect them to be doctors, and the children grow up in this environment with all these expectations of themselves, and they are under the impression that if they don't become a doctor, that if they don't choose that path, they are going to make their parents and their grandparents very unhappy, And sometimes it's just an impression, but sometimes it's an actual pressure, from the family. And now I'm talking about doctors, but it could be, many things. If your father was in the construction business, you might think, the only right job for you is to be in the construction and to do the same manual work that I have ever been doing. So I'm making all these examples with the career. And so the point is that in this case, the child feels very conflicted, because on one side, he doesn't want to disappoint their parents. He wants to make them happy. Every child would like to make their parents happy and proud.
Yes.
It's very normal. On the other side, maybe that child would like to become a lawyer, a musician, an architect, whatever. And that would be their true passion. And they, on one side, they would like to pursue that passion. On the other side, they are really, really afraid that if they would pursue that passion, they would, in a sense, lose their parents. They would lose their approval. It would make them very unhappy. So this is just an example, but when we put conditions on our love, we start creating problems in our family that can have a very, very strong impact. In the case of the child who is pressured to be a doctor or to work in construction, the pressure might be so strong that they end up choosing that career, and that happens very often, and they give their life a direction that is not very healthy. That is not what they really want. So, when I work with families, I always try to make a shift from conditional love to unconditional love, because that makes huge impacts on families. So coming back to your original question, the reason why we cannot really many times talk about certain things is because we are very, very afraid of how the person in front of us is going to react, because we might be pressured, and we don't want to disappoint the person that is in front of us. In case of couples, we don't want to be abandoned. And the fear is usually very, very strong.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. We know how important the 0 to 7 phase is, specifically development of a human beings. And you were talking about sort of this, I suppose, these breaking those generational patterns that could have been basically inherited by their direct family, could be also other people within their circle, I'm sure. But one thing that was always very interesting to me, and we're talking about this sort of a blueprint, right? You're basically you're building your blueprint of who you are as a human being during these stages. One thing I've always been amazed by is people being able to formulate and sort of basically create this understanding that actually this can be approved upon with the right people helping you. So I'm really wondering, how can someone break free from unhealthy, basically, communication habits that they learn either growing up or basically in the realms of their lives? How is it possible to basically unconstruct those to be able to reconstruct what is necessary for clear communication?
Absolutely. That's another very good question. What I teach all my clients, all the people that I work with, is to have a shift in their approach to communication. Many times, for example, when there are problems in a family, we tend to play the role of the victim. We have done everything right, and it's my father or my mother or my aunt, and they made terrible mistakes. We are angry at them, and if we were to approach the subject with them, we would do it in a very aggressive way, like, you're wrong and I am right.
Sure.
And this is the majority of cases, or this is what I see most often. People are used to have this aggressive confrontational style. The problem with that is that you are not creating a safe place for a healthy conversation. You are approaching the conversation, let's say, with a sword. What I teach all of my clients, is to approach the conversation with a white flag. So the intention shifts. So you move from wanting to prove the other person wrong, to make them see how they are wrong and how you're right, and in the end getting their apologies. You move from this perspective to, okay, I know that we are having many problems. What about we sit down together to work them out for the well-being of the family, of the couple? I would really like to understand your opinion and understand my faults, my responsibility, and in which way I hurt you. So if you approach, a problem and issue in your family in this way, the person in front of you is not going to feel attacked, and it's going to open up much more to you because they are going to see that you are not there to attack them, so they are not going to put themselves into defensive mode, but you approach it in a different way. You're like, okay, let's work this as a team. We probably both did things that were not good. Let's try to understand in which way we hurt each other's, and let's try to find ways in which we don't do that anymore. So the approach is extremely important because if you really go and attack someone verbally, you're not going to go anywhere, And this is also extremely important because, when you adopt a very aggressive confrontational style, you just want your voice to be heard and you're not listening to what the other person has to say. And, this is very important. I always say that to all my clients. When it comes to solving issues, when it comes to addressing problems in the relationship, you never have all the pieces of the puzzle. It's like you're making a puzzle with 2 or 3 or 4 people, and the pieces are more or less equally distributed. So if you just go on the offense and you attack someone verbally, you are never going to learn from them. And that's a part that is crucial in healthy communication, because there you have 2 or more people that are trying to learn from each other.
Right. And understanding is more valuable than being right, per se, in relationship, right? There's sort of this shift from winning to understanding, which you're talking about quite at length here, which I think is very, very important. One thing that is very interesting to me within my research of what you do is the sort of this the compassionate conversation style, communication style, something you talk at length about, and it's sort of a very interesting to read it in theory, but I would love if you could go a little bit deeper when it comes down to what does it actually look like in real life to basically use a compassionate conversations. Is there any basically success stories or anything basically that comes to mind when you're thinking of a tangible example of they were doing XYZ in a very defensive, very, very confrontational manners, and it switched basically to this conversation style, this compassionate basically style, which gave them the result they were looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very glad to make a practical example. So I can talk about my personal experience with my family. We used to always attack each other's. We used to continuously interrupt each other's, and it was always a competition for having the loudest voice in the family. Who had the loudest voice in the end won.
Right.
So that was, of course, very unhealthy because it's not communication. It's just something else that leads to nothing, lots of stress, adrenaline, cortisol, but nothing more. Like problems get worse. So when we started having these family reunions, we learned how much valuable it is to let the person in front of you to speak. And so we adopted this approach. We started listening to each other, and we had a quite an important, significant issue that revolved around the manifestation of love and affection to each other. On one side, my parents, our parents, were very perplexed because they were giving us so many things, like a good education, a good house where to live, and they grew up with not all of these possibilities. They weren't poor, but they weren't also very comfortable financially when they grew up, and
Sure.
they didn't have all the things that they gave us. So they worked very, very hard in life, in their lives, and they did everything in their power to give us what they didn't have. And they didn't understand why we weren't so thrilled and so happy. In a sense, they thought that we weren't grateful enough. On the other side, they never really told us how it was for them to grow up. And we didn't know how much they valued all these things that they gave us. We didn't really understand the meaning of, for them to give us, good education, possibilities to go abroad and learn languages. We didn't know that. And, when we asked them, they started telling us, like when we grew up, it was so hard for us. We didn't have all these possibilities. And we were like shocked because we were hearing that for the first time. And, we came to understand, oh, wow, like our parents are giving us, like a car to drive, good education, good schools, and all of these. And it means so much for them. And till now, we had no idea. So we were able to shift our perspective and to see this as, an expression of affection from their side, rather than looking at all of these things just as, material stuff, that had not such an important value in family. On the same day, me and my sister expressed the fact that we were missing, a more direct way of showing their affection towards us. So, for example, the classic "I love you" or saying "we are proud of you no matter what you do." These were words that we didn't hear very often. And so when we went deeper, we found out that our grandparents, my parents' parents, they as well didn't show affection to them with words, with hugs, by saying that they are proud of them. And then we started understanding, okay, it was just they didn't do this with us because their parents as well didn't do that with them. And they told us, yeah, when we grow up, it was considered strange, to say, I love you to your children. You wouldn't just do it. So we started understanding it's not really something that our parents were doing to us. It was just a behavior that they learned from their parents. And the point is that when they understood how important it is for us, they right away changed their behavior. For the first time, in my life, my dad hugged me and said to me, "I love you." And that was a moment that we will remember, for the rest of our life. So coming back to your question, you asked me, how does compassion look like? Compassion looks like this in practical life. It's basically a shift in your mind from thinking that the person in front of you is doing something wrong to you and is doing that on purpose, to this other perspective, thinking, okay, the person in front of me is someone who might not behave at their best, but it doesn't have probably anything to do with me specifically. It's because of their own past issues, their own past traumas, that they are responding to this situation. And that, was the case of our parents not showing love in a more direct way, not saying, I love you, unless when strictly necessary. It was because they interiorized this behavior, and they were probably, in a sense, traumatized from their parents, who would never tell them, we're proud of you, we appreciate you, we value you, with words. They always thought that it was implicit. So this is really the core of being compassionate in relationships. Going beyond thinking it has to do with me, not taking things personal, and thinking, okay, like this person is reacting in these ways, this person is hurting me, but like he's my dad, he doesn't want to hurt me. Let's try to understand where this comes from, and let's help him to solve these issues that are preventing him to have a good relationship with me.
Right. During difficult conversation, Eduardo, the not only is the compassionate portion is important, but also the approach. I think that's what I see very often with people, perhaps having conversation where it doesn't lead to the desirable outcome, is they did that very emotionally, right? They decide to just jump on the couch and directly basically shout at their partner, instead of basically being able to, I suppose, gently and compassionately being able to raise the points that they want to feel heard about. And truly, there's something very interesting that I've seen where those who have the abilities to be quite stoic towards their emotions, not to fully basically eliminate them, but just to basically be able to see them with the third viewer sort of perspective, instead of being one with their emotion to a point where they erupt from it, are the people in which are able to prepare for high stake conversations, specifically with loved ones. You're typically, you've been seeing this, I'm sure you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but there's sort of this understanding of walking on eggshells, right? You love this person, you don't want to truly damage them or basically to make them sad. It's just that you really need to basically just get those words out. That's how it feels when you have this type of I suppose, tedious waters to navigate with your clients or even within your personal life. What's your best advice to be able to prepare yourself to basically launch a quite difficult conversations in a way in which has more chance to be successful?
Yes, there are many techniques, there are many approaches that you can employ. First, as you mentioned, the psychological preparation is very important. So that's what I say to all the people that want to give it a try, to this approach to communication that I suggest. Never try to do that out of the blue. So never go home and over dinner say, okay, I would like to talk about all of these issues. Psychological preparation is very important. You need to make the person in front of you aware that you want to talk about issues, but at the same time, give them time. Give them time. So you want to talk about an issue, and you might ask, "Is this the right time, or can we talk about it tomorrow or in 2 days?" Um, because I see communication as a muscle, not as a quality or a skill that you have. And in most cases, the communication muscle is extremely weak. It's very weak. So what do you do when you have a weak muscles and you want to do some weightlifting? You know, uh, you don't exercise for 8 hours every single day. Like you take your time, or when you want to run a marathon, for example, psychological preparation is important. You don't think, okay, tomorrow I'm going to run a marathon, because psychological preparation is very important. Maybe you want to um, sleep very well for nights in a row, and then you can do it. So the first thing is, don't be rushy. Don't try to push these right away. And the second thing is that emotions are very important. And you mentioned before the people who are very stoic, the people who like control their emotions more, they tend to have more success. And yes, that's true. But that doesn't mean that if someone is a very emotionally unstable person, they cannot communicate. You
Sure.
mentioned the fact that um, many people they just need to get these words out. They need to just say these words, and then it gets very messy. You that's true. Sometimes that happens, but what I wanted to stress is that the problem surfaced much earlier, because when you cannot keep it inside anymore and you need to shout at your husband, partner, or at your family members, it's because you have kept that inside for a very long time. So a part of it, that can prevent these, emotional bursts or, fights that get out of control, is to learn how to not ignore the problem when it surfaces. For example, um, very happy couples, it's not like they never fight or they never have an argument. In my opinion, they have arguments. They just have them at the right time. So when a problem surfaces, it's usually not very big. It's still manageable. And if you tackle it right away, you can, do it in a reasonable way. Of course, if you wait a year, 2 years, or 10 years, and you keep things inside, then from an emotional standpoint, that's very difficult. But the truth is that many people, many families, many couples have kept things inside for years, and you might want to know, like, how do you do in that case? When you're not skilled in communication and when you don't catch the problem right away. Well, first of all, you want to learn how to listen. One of my golden rules in communication is that if someone wants to talk, all the other people in the meeting, in the reunion, they need to listen until this person is done. And why is that important? For two reasons. First, because we want to create a safe environment. And as you said, when people have kept things inside for very long, they tend to get very emotional about it. It's very hard to express what you have to say. It might be very hard to find the words. And, it might take time. If the person in front of you, as soon as you say something, jumps in and interrupts you, then you are not going to be able to say what you wanted to say. You are not going to feel safe because, again, you are going to feel attacked by that person and not listened to. So what I tell my clients is that if someone is talking, even if you wanted to say something and you have the right, to say something, just give that person time because that person needs to feel safe, needs to take all the time. Many times with clients, there are many people that have a very, aggressive, communication style. And these are the ones who do all the talking. On the other side, there are people who are maybe a little bit more shy. They don't have the same direct, aggressive communication style, and they end up almost not saying anything.
Right.
And when I give these people space to talk, whether it's 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 10 or 15 minutes, many times, a lot of things come up, a lot of emotions come up. Sometimes people even cry because it's the first time in which they are heard. It's the first time in which they are given the possibility to say their opinion, to feel heard. And so this is very important. This is an extremely important rule. And the second reason for having this rule, just one person at a time talks, is that many times the people who tend to interrupt each other, they need to learn how to listen, and this is extremely important. It's what we talked about before. We don't have all the pieces of the puzzles. Even now we think that we have, and this is another major problem in communication. We make the assumption that we know everything, that we know like why this and that happened, and you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, and you need to listen. Many people struggle a lot just with listening because as soon as the other person says something that they don't like or they touch difficult they touch upon a difficult topic, they would like to jump right in, and they have done that all of their life. It's a deeply rooted behavior that they have. They cannot wait. But it's extremely beneficial for them when I remember them. Just wait, you will have your turn. You can talk as much as you want after the person in front of you is done. They learn how to listen, and they do that for the first time in their life, and they end up telling me, Edoardo, I never thought that this person felt in this way. I never truly understood that, and I understand that for the first time in my life. And I'm so surprised, and it's ridiculous that I never really listened to this person before. So, things can get emotional, things can get messy because we keep a lot of things inside, but there are ways to work work these issues, work these very highly emotional moments. And in response to your question, the most important thing, the most important rule is really let the person in front of you speak.
Yeah.
Give time, make them feel safe, and listen to.
Sure, and obviously you have 1 mouth and 2 ears for a reason, right? So listening is very very key, and I'm a big proponent that it's very hard to understand others if you don't understand yourself. That's something that is very very key to this discussion as well. Is finding ways in which you can be more wholly within yourself, and therefore through such love of yourself, loving others typically becomes much easier. I want to shift gear a little bit, Eduardo, and talk to you about some of the role of technology in modern relationship, because obviously you know this probably better than anyone. It changed relationship quite dramatically, and I truly believe that technology can either strengthen or weaken basically communications and relationship altogether, depending on how you use it. There was this very interesting quote of yours, which is, "We text more but connect less, and it's time to change that." And I couldn't agree more with you. And I'm still in an age group where I'll go as far as probably 70% of our communication are by text, where emotion is very hard to understand. It's very hard to persuade anybody because there is no tone, there is no facial expression. It's barely basically letters forming words and sentences. But I really want you to tell me more about how can couples use technology to improve rather than damage the connections? And then what are some of the digital habits that are necessary for such thing to occur in modern relationships?
Technology plays such a huge role in communication nowadays. And it's all about your approach to it. As you said, it can be beneficial and it can be damaging. Of course, let's take the example of long distance relationships.
Sure.
They have been made possible because of technology. This is an instance in which technology can help strengthen relationships and improve them. I come from Italy, the northern part of Italy, and I met my the time girlfriend, and she was living in Switzerland, in Zurich, where we now both live. But before moving there, I think it took 1 year and a half, and because of technology, we had the opportunity, to have phone calls every single day, to keep in touch, and so that plays such a huge role. Another example is, nowadays, sometimes, especially in the corporate world or for jobs, you need to maybe go to another country for a week or to go on an assignment or project for a month or several months sometimes. And it's very, very good because you can still keep in touch with the other person. Of course, it's not ideal, but it's really a tool that you have to keep the relationship alive. Of course, there are also lots of downside when it comes to relationship and technology when it's used improperly. For example, as you mentioned, the texts can be very impersonal.
Go ahead.
Of course, you can use emojis to convey what you want, but what I usually tell my clients is that be always a little bit skeptical towards texts, especially when they hurt you, because many times we misuse words, or we say what we want to say in the wrong way. So you need to be a little bit skeptical when an issue arises. Always be like, okay, I interpreted this in this way. I don't like it. But before making conclusions, let's give the other person a chance to explain what they meant. Never really get angry at someone for a text, and that's not really wise.
Sure.
Another way in which communication negatively impacts couples is, for example, when you are having a conversation, you're there physically, both of you, or your family. You're having dinner, and you have all the phones on the table, on the phones loud, and you're trying to have a conversation about your day, and all of a sudden someone gets a notification, says, just let me get that. So it's a continuous interruption, you know, of the conversation. And that's actually very damaging, because if you're talking about something important, to your partner, to your husband, and he keeps checking his phone, you get the message that what you have to say, it's not really that important to the other person. And sometimes that's an issue that you want to address, but some other times, we are so impacted by technology that we just do it, automatically.
Yes.
We get a notification and we check it. It's not that we are not valuing the person in front of us or what they have to say, but in many cases, especially nowadays, with the children who get their first phone when they're 4 years old or 5 years old, it becomes a deeply rooted habit, and then you want to work, on changing that. So, for example, what I suggest my clients is always, when you're having dinner, just put your phone, not on loud. Avoid watching TV at the same time that you are talking, because usually what happens is that maybe you're watching the news, but you're not caring about them. You're having a very good conversation, and all of a sudden there is a breaking news, and you stop the conversation. You look at that. Or worst case scenario, instead of talking, you are just watching your television on the dinner. So, and you're losing maybe a very valuable moment to be together, especially in today with our busy lives.
Yeah.
So definitely, technology can be your asset. It can help you reach people in a way that you couldn't. It's very helpful if you're starting a long distance relationship, or if for some reason your partner needs to go abroad for long. But yes, I always warn against the downsides of communication. Watching the TV over dinner, or always being on your phone, always looking at the notifications instead of talking, because they made a lot of studies on focus and attention, and they described focus and attention as an increasing upward line. The more you focus on something, the more your attention increases. And every time that you get a notification or that you check your emails, you distract yourself from the task that you are at. Your attention levels, they drop significantly, and then it might take you another 10 or 15 minutes to get where you were before. And so you don't want that with the communication with your partners. You want to give them all of your attention. You want to make them feel heard. You want to make them feel valuable. So maybe over dinner, or when you're having a drink together, when you're having coffee together, just make sure that your phone is not on loud, or just ignore the notification for the time being.
Right. It's, to me, and I see this over and over. Truly, I don't see conflict as a sign of failure. Very much I think the opposite. It's typically a very good opportunities to actually grow closer. I know a lot of successful couples. They've been married for now decades, and typically those are the people that talks to each other when something is not going the way they want it. They're very vocal about it, and therefore kind of remove this hersays and perhaps this unsaid portion of the conversations. When you're thinking about obviously how to rebuild trust after communication breakdowns, I think that's very much the case, where it's consistency of showing up with honesty and care that I think flourish the trust pattern, instead of those very, very long-winded basically promises, where very typically unfortunately the people who does a lot of those promises doesn't pursue such basically actions or action items perhaps that they have that they were on the list of necessity for this relationship to thrive. So to me personally, one thing that is very key to sort of the future, sort of the vision of what you believe the future of relationship coaching is, and the relationship of relationship is, periods. I'm really very, very, very wondering about, how do you feel about all these new technologies coming out, and perhaps all these new sorts of definition for relationship. We've been seeing obviously AI with deep fakes. There's all sorts of studies showing that there's many companies now that will be able to like in Japan, which is very famous for this, where you can basically have a buddy, basically as they call it, for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, very, very short term, basically minded, even with the rise of basically sexual content and so on. How does that impact relationship altogether, and how can we as a society, alongside relationship coaches with like yourself, can strengthen what's necessary for the society to thrive, and for society to come up on the other side with a bigger and better understanding that human relationships are intrinsically complex, and things that we must work upon to make a righteous society and civilization.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic. Artificial intelligence and relationships. It's a very hot topic right now, very much debated. Of course, many people start engaging with AI, and they like it more than engaging with people.
Yes.
Because very often, AI is not going to contradict you. It's not going to create conflict. And I think that in China, I think I read that many Chinese people are turning to AI for their mental health issues. So
Yes.
So AI is taking the role for so many people that humans previously had. Psychologists. In the future, we have this image that there is going to be this AI bot that could serve as your friend or
Companionship.
So if you've ever seen Blade Runner 2049, you know what we're talking about. In my opinion, the problem lies with our view of conflict. Conflict is usually very frowned upon, but as you mentioned, the conflict is actually very important in relationships. Very successful marriages, very successful families are the ones that do not back back away. They don't go away when conflicts present itself. In our society, we tended to think as conflict as a bad thing. You have problems within your marriage. You have an issue. You are going through a difficult time. I'm so sorry for you. Like this shouldn't be happening. We have this idea. This shouldn't be happening. How
Yes.
did we get to this point? But the point is that conflict is necessary for the relationship to grow, to improve, and to flourish. It would be unreasonable to believe that couple or family have always been happy and they never had an issue. It's just unrealistic if you think about it. This is not the perfect couple or the perfect family. The point is that as human beings, we all have our own, issues. We all have our own sometimes trauma, and many of the times, these things have nothing to do with the person you are in a relationship with. But anyhow, we all have our personal issues, traumas, and we react to things in life that bring these traumas and personal issues to the surface, and we react to them even, if it has to do with people that have, nothing to do with it. So, for example, in the case of, a couple, conflict may arise because one person is talking about a subject that in the past caused trauma to their partner, and they don't know about it, but they just keep talking and talking and talking, and in front of them they have someone who has been, traumatized, maybe because of bullying, maybe because of many other things, and they start feeling stressed, they start getting emotional, and they might, for example, lash out at the person in front of them. And this creates conflict. But is this conflict, for example, does it have to do with the person who brought up the subject? No, it has nothing to do with the person who brought up the subject. Conflict arises because the couple doesn't know. They don't know each other very well, And in this case, this is a case in which conflict can bring the couple to a better understanding, because if the person sees their husband just lashing out at them for no reason, and they get angry at them, it's not going to go anywhere. But if they employ healthy communication and like, what is it that I said that hurts you? And then the other person starts saying, yeah, because you mentioned this topic or bullying or whatever, and I suffered a lot in my past. And, the other person says, oh, that's interesting. I never knew about it. I'm sorry that I touched upon this topic without the right sensitivity, But in this case, the conflict is something that you want because it brings to a better understanding, Another example could be that when you were a child, you were given names nicknames that you liked, also maybe bad nicknames, and if the person you are in a relationship with for some reasons calls you like that, you will feel very attacked, you feel very hurt. So this is to say that we see conflicts in the wrong way. We should see conflict as a positive thing, in my opinion, instead of a negative thing that shouldn't happen. we see conflict and we're like, well, that's actually very good. Like, there is an issue that we didn't know about, and now we are going to talk through it. We are going to understand where it comes from, and we are going to resolve it so that it doesn't bother us in the future. It's the same approach that a student could take when preparing for an exam. They are doing their preparation for the exam, they are doing a mock exam, and if they get a wrong answer, instead of being angry, oh no, I got a wrong answer, they could be like, that's very good. Through this wrong answer, I can see where I'm lacking in my preparation for the exam, so I can be better prepared for the exam. So the same is with conflict. If we see conflict as a positive thing, I think that the need to establish relationships that are non-human, in this case with AI, is drastically reduced.
Yes.
Because this is one of the most reasons why people interact with AI, because they don't feel understood by the people around them, and it's much easier to interact with ChatGPT, which will not create conflict with you, whatsoever. ChatGPT is not going to be angry at you.
Yes.
So
Yeah, it's a good phase of companionship when there's nobody on the other side telling you you're wrong, telling you must do this, telling you that they would prefer if you address me this way. It makes a relationship much simpler. And just like Nietzsche said, I think that one of the great downfalls and pitfalls of this modern world is making suffering meaningless. This sorts of understanding that if we're not always happy, there must be something wrong. Where it's quite the opposite. It's very hard to enjoy the sunshine if it's not raining once in a while. So, Edoardo Guidali, was an absolute pleasure to have you on the Meaningful Podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation with you and some of your insights on very, very pressing topics. Those things are coming at us very quickly, and without the right guidance to be able to navigate relationships, the human race truly is can be affected by it and diminished by it. So really appreciate all of your insights, and I would love if you can share some last words of wisdom with our audience.
absolutely. I would like to share a quote that I think can really change the way that you see your relationships and can help you to grow tremendously in your family or in your relationship. So I want you to stop wanting to be right and choosing instead to be happy. When you abandon your desire to be right and to prove the person in front of you wrong, you automatically shift your perspective from an attack towards the other person to working together as a team for the well-being of the relationship and the well-being of the family. So stop wanting to be right, instead choose to be happy.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.